You were born to obey. Those words left Tom's mouth with such conviction that for a moment, I believed he was right. We were in a meeting with the entire team when he interrupted me in the middle of my presentation and said it as if he were giving an order, not merely offering an opinion. Some laughed, others pretended not to hear. But I heard. I heard and swallowed hard. Once again. My name is Olivia, and this is the story of how an arrogant boss tried to erase me, and ended up having to applaud my standing victory in front of everyone he thought he controlled. I joined the company 6 years ago, full of ideas and determination. It was a small position, but I knew I could grow if I dedicated myself. And that's exactly what I did. I stayed late, delivered impeccable projects, helped colleagues, fixed mistakes that weren't even mine. Yet recognition never came. And whenever I asked for a chance, I always heard the same reply: "It's not the right time yet." The time, it seemed, was always for others. The men, the director's sons, those who played golf with the boss on Saturdays. Before we continue with the story, I ask you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. This is very important to us. Thank you so much. Tom was the typical leader who confused power with humiliation. He loved to control, belittle, and make jokes during meetings. He said it was just a joke, but everyone knew it wasn't. He ignored me when I spoke, cut my ideas in half, and then presented them as if they were his own. Me? I smiled. I pretended it didn't hurt. I pretended so well that I even began to believe that my place was there. In the corner of the room, a rough draft, a shadow. But inside, something started to break. The last straw came when I developed an entire project on my own. It was a process re-engineering plan that could save the company thousands. I spent nights without sleep reviewing every detail. When I presented it to the committee, Tom interrupted me on the second slide. He said, "I've seen enough. Leave it to me to present this later with the strategic team." The strategic team? I was the strategic team. He took the project, presented it as if it were his own, and received all the praise. Not once did he mention my name. That day I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and cried like a child. I wanted to leave. I wanted to scream. I wanted to vanish. But something inside me said, not now. Not this way. So I began to act differently. I stopped trying to please everyone. I stopped asking permission to exist. I started documenting everything. Every email, every presentation, every report with my name on it. I created a folder called Proofs, a complete dossier of my competence and his incompetence. I began to observe, coldly and silently. I saw how he manipulated data, ignored alerts, favored friends. And while he laughed at my obedience, I was planning my exit. It was around this time that I met Emma, a new hire in the innovation department. Smart, fair, and unlike many, willing to listen. She noticed my contributions and invited me to join a side initiative that no one took seriously: an internal committee on diversity and female leadership. It was seen as just an HR thing, without real relevance. But that was where the turning point in my story was born. In the committee, I began sharing ideas that Emma advanced with the weight of her position. Our project started attracting attention at headquarters. Small at first, but increasingly consistent. And what started as extra work turned into a showcase. When the company announced a major international event to present its new leadership and innovation cases, Emma did something no one expected. She nominated me to represent our committee with one of my own projects. When I told Tom about it, he burst into laughter. "You? On a stage? Seriously, Olivia? You don't even have the presence to lead a meeting, let alone an international event." And then came the phrase I would never forget. "You were born to obey." That day I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I didn't smile. I simply looked at him and said, "You're going to be there, right? I hope you like what you're about to see." And I left the room with my head held high. The following week I prepared like never before. I reviewed my speech dozens of times, met with experts, and created slides that not only told the story of the project, but mine as well. I didn't just want to impress. I wanted to show every invisible woman that obedience wasn't destiny, it was a prison, and that it was possible to break free. On the night before the event, I stayed awake staring at my reflection in the mirror. And for the first time in years I saw Olivia. Not the obedient assistant, not the one who always bowed her head, but the woman who had survived everything and was still standing. Ready. And that's how I reached that stage. With the Proofs folder saved on my drive. With Tom's words engraved in my mind. and with the certainty that no one would ever call me a shadow again. The hall was immense. Impeccable lighting, LED panels pulsing with institutional images, voices in different languages echoing throughout the space. The company's international conference gathered leaders from around the world. It was the most important event of the year, where new guidelines were announced, success stories presented, and more than anything where the faces of the future were revealed. And there I was, Olivia. The same one who until recently heard that she wasn't born to lead. The same one who served coffee at meetings because someone had to do it. Now with a golden badge and my name on the official schedule of the main stage. The feeling of being there was surreal. I mentally rehearsed my presentation while observing faces I had only seen by email before. Important executives, regional directors, representatives from the European headquarters. And among them of course Tom. Seated in the fourth row, dressed in an impeccable dark suit, wearing a cynical expression. He still couldn't believe that I would actually get on that stage. Perhaps he thought I would back out at the last minute. Perhaps he expected me to fail. But I knew, and he knew too, that there was no turning back. My name was announced. Polite applause, some murmurs of surprise. I walked confidently to the center of the stage. I took a deep breath. I looked out at the audience. And I spoke. Not with fear. Not hesitantly. But with the voice of someone who had been silenced for years, and was now impossible to ignore. Good afternoon. My name is Olivia, and today I want to talk about invisible leadership. The kind that supports entire companies but rarely appears in the photos. I began by telling the story of the project I had created, the very same one Tom tried to claim as his own. I showed the results, the data, the practical impact. And then I went further. I talked about what happened behind the scenes. About how so many innovative ideas are born at tables that have no place at the board. About how the talent of so many women is buried under layers of hierarchy, ego, and silence. I displayed graphs, testimonials, international cases. I cited research linking diversity to sustainable growth. And then I set aside the cold numbers. I spoke about myself. I was called obedient as if it were a compliment. But obedience has never been my talent. My strength lies in observation, in adaptation, in silently building solutions while others speak loudly. Today that obedience has turned into courage. And that courage stands here before you. The room fell silent. Not that awkward silence, but the kind of silence that happens when no one wants to miss a word. In the audience, I noticed Emma smiling with teary eyes. Ryan made a discreet sign of support with his clenched fist. While Tom stared at me with half-closed eyes, his jaw set. It was the look of someone who, for the first time, realized he no longer had control. I continued. I revealed the behind-the-scenes of the Diversity Committee, how it had started almost casually and evolved into a hub of ideas now being studied by headquarters as a global model. I showed thank you messages from fellow women who, thanks to the space we created, were able to express themselves without fear. I shared emails with feedback on our projects. All signed by me. Then I opened the final part of the presentation, the folder I called Proofs. It was a compilation of work credited to other people. Projects that had been ignored internally but repurposed, with slight modifications, by those in leadership positions. Data edited to hide management failures. All done carefully, quickly, but clearly, without naming anyone directly, yet with enough evidence for anyone who wished to connect the dots. And the dots pointed to Tom. The tension in the hall was palpable. Some stared at the slides, incredulous. Others looked at him. And he avoided any eye contact. Closing the presentation, I made it clear. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because this company needs to wake up. Because the leadership of the future can no longer be decided by who speaks the loudest or who carries the right last name. It must be decided by those who build, who think, who act. And that is not a choice. It's an urgency. Applause. This time genuine. Not polite clapping. But intense. Warm. Sincere. I saw executives from headquarters stand up. I heard my name repeated in whispers and comments. People who had never even known I existed now looked at me as if I had redrawn the map. And Tom? Seated. With no applause. With no ground beneath him. At that moment I felt no hatred. No anger. I felt peace. Because nothing hurts a man more than underestimating the woman he tried to erase. only to see her shine under the spotlight he believed would belong only to him. I left the stage with a light soul. Emma hugged me tightly. Ryan smiled as if he knew that this moment was bigger than all of us. And even before the event ended, I was called into a closed-door meeting with the International Leadership Committee. They wanted to talk. They wanted to hear more. They wanted to know how I envisioned the future of the company. And for the first time, I wasn't there to obey. I was there to lead. The closed-door meeting was held in a glass room on the top floor of the convention center. From up there you could see almost the entire city. It was as if the world had finally opened up for me after years of being locked in a room where I was only allowed to listen, never to speak. The headquarters directors were seated around the table. Men and women from different countries, all with attentive looks. I entered with a racing heart but a calm face. I sat down. And for the first time they asked me to explain how I saw the future of leadership in the company. And I spoke. I spoke like never before. Without fear, without haste, without beating around the bush. The leadership you know is crumbling. And it isn't because the market has changed. It's because people have changed. The new generation refuses to be treated like cogs in a machine. They want belonging. They want truth. They want leaders who listen and learn, not those who shout and command. I didn't bring a PowerPoint nor magical numbers. I brought my lived experience. Every word I said was like a stone removed from the wall that had kept me from climbing for so long. And they listened. Emma was there too, sitting by my side as an ally and witness. At many moments she would simply nod, her eyes filled with pride. Ryan, who had been invited to offer the perspective of the men allied with the diversity committee, spoke with a firmness I had never seen in him. We failed for far too long. And Tom's leadership was a clear example of that. It was based on fear, silencing, and manipulation. The new generation doesn't thrive on that kind of soil. A heavy silence followed. Not a silence of disagreement, but of processing. The kind that comes before major decisions. At the end of the meeting, one of the directors, Marcus, looked at me seriously. "Olivia, are you willing to lead this change? Not as a symbol but as a strategy." I took a deep breath. The question was not a small one. But my answer was clear. I've already started. I just need for you to stop getting in my way. The faces around the table lit up with subtle smiles. It was official. They had seen. The following week the entire office felt different. And it wasn't just the buzz about the conference or my speech on stage. It was the tension in the corridors. The movement in the board. The absence of Tom. First came the formal emails. Mr. Tom is temporarily removed from his duties. Then the rumors that headquarters had launched an audit, that old decisions were being reviewed, that there were allegations not only of poor management but also of abusive behavior toward other female employees. None of that surprised me. The difference was that now someone was finally listening. When I returned to my office, I found a note taped to the screen of my computer. It was from a new intern whom I barely knew. "Thank you for not bowing your head. You opened a door for all of us." I read it about 10 times before tucking it into my pocket. It wasn't just about me. It never was. Meetings began to take on a different tone. The tables once occupied solely by men now featured more female voices. The diversity committee was transformed into an official initiative with budget and autonomy. And I was invited to assume the role of regional director of human development. Yes, director. The position that Tom used to trample on people would now be held by someone who truly understood what it was like to be on the other side of the table. I accepted. But on one condition, that the culture truly change. Enough of autocratic leaders masked as visionaries. Enough of sycophants being promoted while brilliant minds were ignored. If I was going to sit in that chair, it needed to be a space that listened, included, and transformed. The first meeting I led as director was emblematic. A full room. Everyone watching me. And there at the back, the chair that used to be Tom's, empty. It was symbolic. His absence was not just physical, it was structural. He represented everything the company needed to leave behind. Leadership based on control, authoritarianism disguised as competence, the machismo hidden behind a command profile. Now that empty chair was a reminder that no one is untouchable. And that change, when done with courage, always comes. After the meeting, many people came to congratulate me. But the conversation that touched me the most was with a woman who had worked with me since the beginning. A secretary from the accounting department named Sandra. She approached in silence, looked me in the eyes and said, "I saw you being humiliated so many times. I never thought I'd have the strength to react when it was my turn. But now I know, we don't have to ask permission to exist." I embraced Sandra tightly. Because she was right. That night when I got home, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and looked up at the sky. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty for having won. It wasn't arrogance. It was justice. And justice sometimes looks a lot like peace. The days that followed felt like breathing fresh air after years of suffocation. Every step I took in the company carried a new firmness. The same walls that once muffled my voice now seemed to amplify every word I spoke, with respect. I, Olivia, who was once called obedient as if it were an insult, was now listened to attentively, consulted frequently and, at last, recognized with dignity. But the most important thing wasn't the position. It was the silent transformation that happened within me. For years, I clung to the illusion that I needed the validation of men like Tom to feel capable, to feel like a leader. But now I saw clearly, it wasn't about earning their approval. It was about reclaiming my own voice. And that I had done. Of course, challenges still remained. Culture doesn't change overnight. There was resistance, jokes disguised as humor, and biased looks in the corridors. But now, around me there were allies. Women who saw themselves in me. Men willing to relearn. A new climate where vulnerability and leadership could coexist without shame. One morning, as I was reviewing a new internal development plan for young talents, I received a notification on my phone. Tom had resigned. He couldn't withstand the pressure of the audit. The reports revealed ethical deviations, favoritism, and silencing. It was the end of a cycle. A cycle of unbridled power disguised as competence. But contrary to what many expected, I did not celebrate. I didn't post indirect messages. I didn't dress in arrogance. Do you know why? Because it was never about him. It was about me. About all of us. About the chance to work in a place where no woman needs to create a secret folder called proofs to be taken seriously. A few days later, I was invited to speak at a university. The topic was Women in Leadership. What still holds us back? I sat before a room full of students. Young, hopeful, many with the same eyes I had years ago, hungry for opportunity and respect. I shared my journey with them. I didn't hide the pain. I showed the cuts behind the scars. And at the end, a girl at the back raised her hand and asked, "What would you say to someone who still believes that a woman's role is only to follow orders?" I smiled. I took a deep breath. And I answered, "Maybe we followed orders for too long, only to learn exactly how to break them." The room applauded. But what truly moved me was the look in that girl's eyes. She didn't see me as a successful executive. She saw me as a mirror. And that's when I understood. The real impact wasn't in what I had achieved. It was in what I helped others believe was possible. Today the company is different. Meetings are more diverse. The Diversity Committee has become an international program. And the Olivia Model, as they started calling it, was presented at conferences in Europe and the United States. I received invitations to write, to speak, even to lead initiatives outside the company. But my greatest pride isn't in my resume. It's in the anonymous messages I receive by email. In the notes left on my desk. In the smiles of those who once walked around with their heads down. One day I found a printed copy of one of my phrases, taped to the wall in the training area. True leadership isn't imposed. It transforms the environment so that everyone can flourish. And there, looking at that ordinary sheet of paper taped up, I cried. Because I knew that, finally, I had stepped out of the shadows. No, I did not forgive Tom. And I didn't need to. Because forgiveness wasn't the point. My power lay in having continued on without him. The freedom I felt didn't come from seeing him fall. It came from seeing myself standing tall. Today, when I close the door to my office at the end of the day, I no longer carry the weight of proving anything to anyone. I just am. With all the pain, all the struggles, all the victories I built with a cool head and a warm soul. And when someone asks, "You get your revenge on him every day, right?" I smile. And I answer, "No. I get my revenge by living what he said I'd never have." What did you think of this story of revenge and justice? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell me which moment was your favorite. Would you have done something differently? Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and don't miss any of our stories full of twists and impactful endings.